Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast, where we sit down with seasoned CMOs and emerging talents in sales and marketing to explore the wins and occasional losses that shape today's leaders and the strategic maneuvers that can help propel you to the forefront of B2B marketing.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast. Today, I am thrilled to welcome John Common here. John is the founder, CEO, and chief strategist at Intelligent Demand. He started Intelligent Demand over 15 years ago, which really is a go-to-market partner across technology, digital media, strategy. It really helps drive those strategies. So we're super excited to have him here today because this type of an agency or a partnership like Intelligent Demand is critical for helping to accelerate and grow the ABM story, the ABM platform, the role that ABM plays in a MarTech stack at partner, at customers of yours, I'm sure. So I'm excited to hear from your perspective how all that's going.
Thanks, Kelly. Good to be here.
Awesome. Well, good. Other fun facts I'm going to share that I'm not going to steal John's fun fact for later, but things I have loved learning is John lives in Denver with his family, but he also loves to write, record, play music. I have none of those gifts, so I'm always fascinated by those. So maybe we can learn more. Though I do have an idea for I was like, I should just ask ChatGPT, but I want to write a script for a musical based on the whole catalog of Styx. I feel like there's like a major storyline there.
Interesting.
And every time I hear Styx on the radio, I'm like, this is the opening number. Can you hear it? Like this is the set change. Like I can tell there's this long instrumental section. This is a set change, or this is how we go into intermission. This is the big bang of the intermission before.
Oh, wow. Now you're talking about the band Styx with the one with the spelled with a Y.
Yeah, with a Y.
The old school Styx. Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm like,
you're right. They're kind of a cinematic band now that I think about it. They really are.
Yeah, there's big production. Like it's kind of got some big band type style to it. So anyway, I have no musical chops at all, but for some reason, every time I hear them, I'm like, yes, this is a musical waiting to happen. There is a script in here somewhere. So I need to like pick apart the words to figure out what the storyline is, but there's something. So
there is.
But I may come to you and say, hey, I need your help writing this music.
Kelly, you should chase that vision. I agree with that idea.
You can see it? Okay. Yeah. Okay, I will. I want to turn that out this weekend maybe. And then you're also into welding and a small batch whiskey distilling.
Yes, but never at the same time, because that could be very dangerous. That's right. Yes. Somewhere along the way, you stare at enough, I don't want to sound bad, but you stare at enough glasses of bourbon or rye or scotch, and over time you start to say, how did this happen? Because this is delicious, One thing leads to another. You go have a drink with your buddy, and along the way I found out that several of my friends are into small batch whiskey making, and then they started inviting me over to learn about the process, and
Can you do it, Paul? Is it like something you can do in your own kitchen?
Yes, I think I can say that legally. Yes.
That sounds like you just like acknowledge like you're a moonshiner on the side.
Exactly. That's what I'm worried about.
But I love that. That's very cool that I didn't know that. I mean, there's a lot of distilleries here in Austin. There's probably a lot in Denver as well. That seems like a market that would have that kind of thing. But they're these big, massive, like facilities and all kinds of things with the big machines or tanks or whatever it is. So I never thought about it. I guess small batch is just something that you can do in, I don't know, in liters instead of.
Yeah. No, these little copper pot stills, they're called. They're like literally like moonshiners, exactly like that.
Very cool. That's awesome.
Come to Denver sometime. I'll show you.
Yes, I would love that. I absolutely would. I'm in Denver surprisingly more than I thought I would be, which is good. So we have a lot of demand basers in the Denver area.
Yeah.
And then welding. How did welding come about?
Well, I don't know. Maybe you can relate to this. We spend as go-to-market people, executives, marketing salespeople, we spend most of our time working on these nebulous, vague, never-ending projects where you're like, you get to the end of the day and you're like, what did I do? What did I actually accomplish today? And over the years, it's made me lean into things that you can touch and feel, and they have a beginning and a middle and an end.
Yep.
If that makes any sense. And welding is that. And I still don't know how to weld. It's more in the aspiration than a skill at this point, but I enjoy learning things. So I thought I'd try to pick up welding.
I've learned it's really about the size and consistency of the bead. Right?
That is what I understand as well.
That's what I understand. So I was an industrial engineer in college at Texas A&M, and we had to take a welding class. In fact, I just have this sitting on my desk. I welded my name on this
the presence of greatness here. That is amazing.
But look how and it's supposed to be flawless on the back.
Yes.
And that's my back. So it's not flawless. It's kind of a mess here that's coming through. But still, it's something. But this is the extent of my welding career right here.
Well, very legible, very good.
Yeah, at least I can tell what it says, right? Even if there's some extra notches.
Well, I got to ask, we doing TIG? We're doing MIG? What are we doing here? Do you recall?
You just went a layer. You just went past me.
Okay, sorry. All right. That's
I did welding in college. That's not what that one was from. We had to do I think it was one semester, we had to do a third of the semester on milling, a third on lathing, and a third on welding.
Yes.
Because it was industrial engineering, which is a lot about manufacturing and stuff. So you had to kind of understand how things were made in a production plant.
Very interesting. There's a metaphor here. I know there's a metaphor somewhere.
A parallel that runs between that and marketing, careers, your life.
See, I'm already ruining welding with marketing. I got to stop.
Well, it's funny, I think about a lot, totally off script. Here we go. I have 3 kids, and they're 16, 14, and 11. So I have one who's 2 years away from college and one who's 5 years away from college. And it's just assumed that they want to go to college, they want to do whatever. But we've always tried to have these conversations where if we saw any tendency of gifts with their hands, if we saw that they were kids who were not wired for college necessarily,
right?
But instead were kids who had a propensity to electrician or welding or woodwork or something. I feel like we have such a shortage of that talent in the world, and they make a killing because there's a shortage of them. Especially if you can maybe get a 2-year business degree and run a welding business or run a woodworking business. There's so much to be had there where we have this abundance of, like you said, business, marketing, mind folks, where we sort of operate in this ephemeral world of business. Whereas people who actually can do things, there's a shortage.
And I know this hits painfully close to home probably for both you and me, but the world could use 10 less LinkedIn influencers and 10 more welders. That's a good swap, I think.
It's a great swap. I think it's exactly right. And that's the hard part, right? Is you're man, I want my kids to go to college. That seems like the right thing to do. They seem to be interested in that. But I'm also but they also look at my life and they're you just sit in front of a computer all day on Zoom calls, kill me. That sounds like the worst life ever. My kids are I want to do something. I want to do anything that's not sitting in front of a computer for 9 hours a day.
The younger folks that I know, I sound like my dad. Young kids these days, but the younger folks that I know are so impressive. Do they impress you? They impress the heck out of me and not just their intelligence and their savvy, but but more almost. They seem so much more evolved, than I was. Dear God, and their ability to look at life and not get suckered into the false choice. Do you want to be a CMO or do you want to be good with your hands? A lot of the younger folks I know say, yes, I want both. Don't make me choose. I love that.
It doesn't have to be a choice.
That's right. It's kind of inspiring, honestly.
Well, they also have a path of where we grew up. I don't know how old you are, but let's assume you grew up in a similar time period to me. There was sort of an expectation of you go to high school, you do well, you go to college, you do well, you get a job with a 401k and buy real estate as soon as possible because renting is a waste of money. And then you pay off your car as quick as possible. There was sort of these steps of what you did. And then you kind of moved through your career. And there was no kind of stop in the middle that kind of said, what do you actually want to do? What do you want to be when you grow? And so even now I'm however, 25 years after I graduated from college, I'm still what do I want to be when I grow up? I don't quite know. I happen to love what I'm doing now, but I still don't know what the end state looks like. And so kids today, I feel they may not know exactly, but they know very clearly what they don't want to do. Mm-hmm. And they and they're not going to settle for kind of anything less. And to your point, they just know a lot more. I don't know if it's because of how much more access you have to the internet and everything within the world with phones and things that we didn't have, but they're purpose driven in the way they want to operate. I think college has gotten more competitive, and so kids feel they can't just graduate with good grades and get into a good school. You have to have good grades and have extracurriculars and do volunteer work and have like saved orphans. And like, they have to have done all these things in order to like stand out amongst the like 100,000 people that applied to the same school. And it's,
there is a, not to be a total nerd, but you're right. I bet when you and I were coming up, I recall the same thing you just said, which is that there was a playbook.
Yeah.
There was a career playbook that I think is the old playbook for real. And I think what we're learning in lots of different domains, I'll call it, or areas of life, is that alleged best practice or the obvious way, the way you're supposed to do a career or a go-to-market strategy or how to build a company, or so many things are being challenged. And I think that it is wonderful. It is stressful and scary because change is scary. It is filled with risk, but it's also filled with so much opportunity as well, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost, like, I feel like my parents were somewhat out of their depth on how to like coach me on a career, how to like expose me to all the things. Cause they should know, like, it was the days of like, you want to be a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, a fireman, right? And there wasn't like a lot of other choices. Now there's like a million. No one ever said you want to be like a social media influencer. Like, do you want to go like be an influencer and play video games all day? Like those are like careers. And so I think the exposure. And so now there's so many more options, and we're probably once again unequipped to properly guide because there's so many other choices now. I had a guy on a couple weeks, maybe last week, and he said he advises his daughters. He has 7 kids. He said, I advise my daughters to choose a career that doesn't scale, because if it scales, AI is going to replace them. But if they can choose something where like they themselves are adding unique value that a computer can't, then that's the job to do. And I was like, it's a good filter to think about.
Yeah.
So
that's actually really an interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting how it's really been the ever expanding drumbeat of technology writ large, but specifically Gen AI? Isn't it interesting how it has utterly flipped that human value proposition? Where can I bring my genius? So to speak, and to your point, it's like people who do things with their hands, people who what I'm seeing, even in the world of B2B growth, at least so far, is that, AI is obviously intelligence. The incremental cost of what they call intelligence, quote unquote, is becoming zero, basically. So I won't chase this, but you got to click on what do you mean by intelligence, but we won't do that. But okay, so intelligence, or at least some level of thought, is basically free or soon to be free. And what do you do in light of that? And what I'm seeing is the obvious stuff, like somebody has to go put a hand on a rake and or go learn how to make beer or make whiskey. Like AI isn't going to make wine or build a house.
Yeah.
But I think even in knowledge work, AI is on the verge maybe of becoming mediocre on its way to good plus at doing certain kinds of tasks.
Yeah.
But what we humans, especially those of us who do our homework and apply the kinds of things that I know you and I both believe in, I think we still have massive value to add around the connecting of dots, the aligning of process and people and teams, the thoughtful kind of longitudinal strategic thinking versus an episodic act of something.
Yeah.
I think those episodic, disconnected, misaligned acts are at high risk of being cannibalized. And honestly, even though it's going to hurt in the short term, probably, I say, welcome to technology, do it.
Yeah.
But I think there's this integrative, if that's a word, this integrated pattern that there's so much need and opportunity around.
That's it. Yeah, that's interesting. I think you're right. I think I hadn't thought about it that way. We talk a lot in the team about how do we make sure we don't, and maybe it's what you're talking about, we don't sort of spur random acts of marketing, but that we instead have like sort of a cohesive direction. And yes, there will be a lot of like irons in the fire, like, because we're trying to generate enough pipe, to clip. It all needs to be pointing in the same direction. And so we talk about like, how do we do that? How do we do it fast, but not just speed in random acts, but actually my chief product officer calls it velocity. And because he says it's speed in one direction. Like, so how do we get everybody operating quickly and executing, but in one direction. And that is, yes, could you automate all of those things going one direction? Yes. But could you automate the centralization and the sharing and the themes and the topics and the best practices, all that stuff? Probably not. Like, that's where the human is so critical in bringing those things together. So interesting. Well, let's talk about that, because we are talking about, some of the things that I think we probably agree on and see eye to eye on is really about how do we leverage, how do you drive efficient growth in B2B? And I hear efficient, and I heard intelligent, and this name of your company. And so curious if those are all sort of in the same intentional kind of word system that's really about being smarter in the way that you execute. How does all that work, and what do you think is effective these days in this environment?
Well, the name of my firm is Intelligent Demand, which is just another way of saying smarter growth. Yeah. And in these days, smarter growth you almost can replace the word smarter with efficient because of really some major changes that I think we all know intellectually, but I think what's been happening over the last 12 plus months is we're moving through the 5 stages of grief as a collective field, the 5 stages of grief around what does it actually mean to be no longer in growth at all costs? And what does it mean to be in the era of efficient growth? And it starts with, I don't remember all 5, but it starts with denial and it ends with acceptance. And I think we're actually in the early days, depending on the market segment you're in and what your private equity and board is saying to you. Yeah. We're in the early days of acceptance. And that major shift has happened because of significant ongoing changes in buyer behavior, because of the major shifts in the macro economy, because of the never-ending, accelerating technology disruption and evolution. And then lastly, I think the field that we are all in, and any nerdy person who's listening to this podcast is in, which is the 4th reason, is the art and science of go-to-market and B2B growth itself has been evolving and growing and disrupting. And you put all of that together, and I think the net is that, the old playbook, whatever your old notions of given universal truths about how you grow this company, how you set up a revenue process, how you go to market, how you direct brand and demand and SDR and sales, that all of that conscious and frequently sometimes unconscious playbook thinking is being outed as not as effective or sometimes wildly ineffective now. And I think that's exciting. I think it's scary, and I think it's filled with opportunity. I really do.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. So I want to back up a couple steps. So one, you talked about the sort of death of growth at all costs. What do you think caused that? You talked about some of the things that have changed in the environment since then, but do you think there was a catalyst of when that pivot happened?
That's a great question. Well, I think that there's the obvious macro things around, the pandemic, the supply chain issues, the fears around Ukraine that translated into interest rates changing. So I think interest rates have been the major lever that put the biggest nail in the coffin of growth at all costs. But I think it wasn't just that. I think that was the last nail. I think that it began sooner or earlier in the timeline. And, I was thinking about this the other day. Many of the people who work in B2B go-to-market, marketing, sales, CS, product, many of them have never known a time that wasn't growth at all costs because they're just not old.
If they're around after, say, 2008,
right?
So the last 15 years up until a couple of years ago when this started.
And so I think that we now are beginning to realize that all of those behaviors and assumptions that for many people in our industry is just the way that it is, that they took that as the baseline when it was not the baseline. It was a high water mark. Yeah. And so what feels like the end of the world, maybe if you've only known what it feels like to have money, all the money you need. Do you remember, it wasn't that many quarters ago where the biggest problem that a lot of go-to-market teams had was, I just can't hire people fast enough, even without interviewing them. Do you remember that? Because I do.
I remember 2 parts of that. One was I can't hire fast enough. And sure, I'll pay this college kid who just graduated, who knows nothing, $200,000 a year. It was stupid prices for talent. Right. and you couldn't find them even at those crazy prices. It was
right.
Yes, it was like this, and it went so fast. And that was, I call 2021. It was kind of like right coming off the hood, like the heels of the pandemic.
Yes. And I don't subscribe to the thought at all that our market or the people who manage go-to-market people or the boards that manage the people who manage go-to-market people. I don't think that they're not dumb. Yeah. So why did that happen? Why did that happen is the question. And I think I'll be interested in your take on this, but I think it has something to do with, at the root of a lot of our market is tech. We have been on a 10 plus year SaaS technology binge. Mm-hmm. And the automatic behavior was, and I even remember, and I love his work. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I remember Scott, that's his last name, the MarTech logo map guy, Scott Brinker. Scott Brinker. Yep. Once I realized we had hit peak SaaS when I saw his newsletter several years ago, where he literally, without being ironic, said the best strategy with your technology strategy in your company should be buy the tool first and then figure out if it works later. He literally had I can find it, but, right. And I'm not, he's a very smart guy. That's not what we have to buy now. But there was when I read that, I was like, we have hit surely the SaaS bubble here. And so anyway, so when you have a buying environment when money is free, no one has ever known anything but go growth at all costs. And you have a SaaS industrial complex, and they're all running the triple, double model. Yeah. That's how you end up getting way over your skis, I think.
Yeah. It's like a repeat of what happened back in 2008 on sort of our mortgages, right? Like just a surplus of too much of 3 to 5 year, like crazy low rates. I think to me, the moment was when Silicon Valley Bank busted.
Oh, yeah.
Like a year and a half ago. And right. They were and it was exactly that, right? It was those interest rates. It was like a culmination of just a surge of just stupid valuations, 25, 30x multiples on nothing companies that just had an idea or a PLG model, but didn't actually know how to like sell anything, scale anything, manufacture anything. And they just, and like these crazy multiples, and you'd be like, that company's worth how much? And you would look at this, it was just crazy. And I feel like, and I don't know if it was exacerbated by greed of VCs or if it was exacerbated by just so much money pumping into SaaS because they saw it as the next big thing. But I feel like when they busted and all of a sudden valuations went from 25x to 7x on its best day, overnight, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, like these companies that used to be worth like 3x this just lost like literally 2/3 of their value in a day. Right. And it was, similar to what we had years ago. And then I think when Salesforce missed their earnings,
that's right.
It was a Q1 this year. And it was like the first time they had missed since like 2006. And you were like, oh wait, like we have officially saturated the market with so much MarTech and RevTech that right. There is not like the market is full right now. Like, where do we go? Where is the available pipeline? And if a company like Salesforce, it's so critical in so many different stacks, hits like whatever, I think their stock took like a 20% hit that day. Like, and you're like, okay, we're in a different environment than we were 2 years ago.
That's right. Yeah, that's great. And our job as strategy minded people mm-hmm. is to play chess, not checkers, and to be thinking more than one move ahead. Right. Yeah. And what do we know about humans and systems? We know that they don't change because they ought to, and they don't change usually because they want to. They change because they have to. And I think, this moment we are in and working through is hard in mm-hmm. many ways, but it is also, I'm not being Pollyanna-ish when I say it's filled with opportunity. It really is filled with opportunity. And I think one way to say that opportunity is, and we both do this, you and I, for a living. I have a front row seat, my team and I, for over the years, for hundreds of go-to-market teams. And they're all filled with smart people. They go to the webinars. They are buzzword compliant. They understand, but there's one thing to know a best practice or the right thing to do, and it's an entirely other thing to actually operationalize and do that thing. Mm-hmm. human beings and systems don't cross that chasm from I'm smart and I know what to do, and now I am doing it until they have to. And I think that's the moment we're in. And that's the true upside of the moment we're in, is that we now have this massive, irresistible force for change that unless you just want to get hammered, it's like time. Here we go.
Yeah.
Game on. And I think what it's also showing is that, and this is good news for Demandbase, for intelligent demand, for those of us who practice modern, forward-looking go-to-market and growth, it's an opportunity to help these smart, ambitious, amazing people we call customers navigate that and get to the other side, efficient growth, smarter growth, however you want to call it, faster and easier and with less risk.
So a couple of thoughts on that. So I love what you're saying, and I'm totally on board with what you're saying. For people that are listening, so for context, our sort of next-gen CMO concept is really geared towards the kind of like up-and-coming future CMO. So think VPs of marketing, directors of demand gen, those kind of folks who eventually want to be a CMO. That's who primarily listens. So they may, based on where they're at in their career, they may only sort of know the newish. So help me like dimensionalize. You talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but talk a little bit about what the old playbook looked like. What was kind of bad about it? Maybe there were some good things we took about it. And then what is the critical parts of the new playbook as you talk about, like, as we are hopefully on the cutting edge of that both like an ABM company like Demandbase, as well as, a go-to-market partner like you for intelligent demand, can help. Like, what's the major differences between the two?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I do have some thoughts about that. I'll try to keep them short and let you and I do it together. So old playbook. I think we have to get in a time machine and go back to like 2004, 2005, when the smart folks at what used to be called and still is called Eloqua were building, whether they realized it or not at the beginning, a new tech category called marketing automation. So that's, in my mind, to go all the way back to there as one of the first major beginnings of the old, what is now the old playbook. But what was then was super amazing and exciting. So marketing automation. Then follow that with 2011, which is Serious Decisions First waterfall model.
Yeah.
Remember the simple one where it was lead, MQL, SAL.
It didn't have double funnels. It didn't have any of that. Just one.
None of that. It was just like boom. And then of course that they moved forward and it turned into the more complicated funnel, then the more complicated funnel. And now we're in buying teams and demand units, and we're finally realizing that we don't want just to win customers. We need to keep them. Right. So that's the second thing. Then I think you see the rise of content marketing and inbound as a practice.
Yeah.
And then I think you see the rise of the SDR function and right behind it, the rise of sales engagement platforms like Outlook, SalesLoft, et cetera. And and then you get, I actually have it. And then along comes this book, right? Which took those technologies and emerging sort of disconnected best practices and said, do you want predictable revenue? Here is the model for that. And that's where we get, I think the old playbook started kind of snapped into place, and we know it. And the reason we know it is, and here's the dirty secret, despite all of the knowing of, all the things that you and I are about to talk about, probably about what the new playbook looks like.
Yes.
In most B2B companies, they are running a lead-centric, marketing is an MQL factory, over-focus on acquisition, over-focus on active demand to the detriment of brand and demand creation and reputation building, operating in silos. Does this sound familiar, y'all?
Measuring vanity metrics like website visitors and
vanity metrics,
click-through rates, and
going into the market in an outside-in, product-focused, feature-focused way. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And that's the old playbook. And here's the thing. You go back to 2005, 2010, 2015 even, it wasn't all bad, because what was great about the old playbook is it brought some structure and rigor and process and the beginnings of forecastability and predictability.
Yeah.
It at the root of it was use these tools, use these better practices to create your go-to-market like a single path, linear manufacturing plant that produces new logos.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot good about that, but it stayed ossified and frozen. And we kept doubling down while the stuff that I said before happened. Buyers shifted, technology shifted, go-to-market shifted, the macro environment shifted. And so now most companies are running an utterly obsolete technology.
Yeah.
And I mean, the technology of their go-to-market strategy is just wildly out of sync with the reality they're in.
Yeah.
And so, you're probably going to, what do you do about it is the real question. But I think that's the old playbook.
Yeah. And I think that funnel, building on what you said, like which talked about serious decisions with that first waterfall, what assumed a somewhat linear motion.
Right.
And we realize now it's not linear. Things come in at all different stages of the funnel. And you realize it's more of like a cyclone, like a tornado, than it is like a straight up and down, right? Like it just spins around and you hope that some things finally fall out the bottom. But you also realize that that's what you talk about running in silos. That focus on a lead factory created that further divide with sales, because you can get leads in lots of ways. And the overwhelming majority of them are just crap, right?
Yep.
Like, how do you actually get ones that are the right customer, the right time, the right message? And so there's this, and that's where, I think that shift started with saying, hey, we need to not, leads can't be our measure of marketing success. It has to be further down. We need to know that there's a quality component, that there is a high propensity to convert to revenue, because they are, they fit whatever criteria or whatever it is. So I feel like the funnel shape, so there were some things that came with it, right? The funnel shape stayed just a little bit more chaotic than it used to be. I think the drop off where it assumes it kind of went like this. It's more like leads are way out here, but what actually comes out is much skinnier, because
Right.
there's fewer that are kind of really in the market for your product at that time. And then I think and then you kind of overlay that with, the market of, a tough market, as you talk about. Some of that says, hey, is new logo where it's all at? Or is there a customer component to it? Like you talk about, like that post-sales motion, it's in a market like this, I'm much more likely to spend more money with a brand I use and love than to take a risk on a new one. And so how do we nurture that? How do you get them past just closing the deal to wanting to spend more, to stick around, to grow with you, to buy into your strategy, to get sticky and wrapped up in your business so that it's hard to untangle and you can hang on. Your NRR ends up being, through the roof. So a lot of, and things that sort of then help your LTV to CAC ratio too, and making sure that you're getting the right return on what you're spending to acquire new customers.
That's right. Yeah. And I think, I've been here in this mental space where you and I are like right now in this conversation, which is you begin to really clearly see how non-academic running an old playbook is. It's not some academic thing that only is interesting once a year at the Forrester Summit. It is a existentially important thing to address. And you go, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? And the what do you do about it is literally, I built a business at the intersection of that, of what do you do about it, right?
Yeah.
And and that's where I live. That's how I pay my mortgage is with this thing called smarter go-to-market, right? Yeah. And so you peel that back, and I think that, is it okay to talk about this?
Yeah, please, welcome. This is exactly
all right,
what I'm talking about.
Because I think that so many podcasts, the hard part is not to, I think it's important and an important milestone in a company to recognize, let's just be honest, old playbook's not working like it used to. So I think that's good, but it's not good enough.
Yeah.
So then you go from old playbook to what does new playbook look like? Yeah. And we can talk about that if you want to. I mean, we probably should, but when we do, Kelly, it's going to be, we're going to say a bunch of words that are correct and have been heard before. Yeah. Honestly, we're going to say targeting and personalization and cross-functional orchestration. We're going to say smarter use of data. And we're going to say measure what matters. And we're going to say personalized experiences. And we're going to say ICP, and we're going to say targeting. And those are the pillars of what is the opposite of the old playbook. So that's good. That's it. I think that's the second major aha in this organism called an enterprise's change management journey. Yeah. But even that's not good enough, right? So I'm like, I've been working with so many clients over the years. They saw the old playbook. They're ready for change. They have read the words that mean new playbook, and still, honestly, it's still hard. So what do you do about it? And I think that I've become very humbled by change management. And honestly, I've really been very humbled by it, because I'm pretty sure the wrong way to do it. This is true if you're serving an SMB, but it is mega true if you work with enterprise and mid-market companies like we both do.
Yeah.
The wrong way to do it is try to boil the ocean and to get this entire multi-billion-dollar, sometimes certainly multi-hundred-million-dollar company to simultaneously somehow get religion at the same time. And like, I don't know about you. I don't think that works. I don't think it works in the real messy world of competing priorities and different levels of understanding. So what do? I think you narrow it down, you niche down, you focus, and you isolate, if it's in an enterprise business, one division, one critical growth goal, and you build a ragtag rebel army to execute what at ID, Intelligent Demand, we would call an integrated growth play. Okay. That inside of that growth play, it's real. Like you're going to spend money. We're going to do things. We're going to connect. We're going to apply all those smart words of the new playbook, but we're not going to try to boil the ocean. Yeah. We're going to see if we can prove to ourselves the new model for a growth goal and a division. I talked to Gabe Rogel about this on my podcast, and this is something that he and I aligned about.
Yeah.
He said the same thing. He's like, I didn't realize we were aligned, but what we are. Yeah. That would be my piece of advice to folks who are on this call, which is if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know the old playbook's got to change. You probably already know most, if not all, of the smart things you ought to be doing at scale, but you're probably staring at this wall of change management.
Overwhelming change management.
How do I start? What do I do? I think you pick one or two really important growth goals, connect them to the right go-to-market motion, and apply these pillars that Kelly and I are talking about smarter go-to-market, and then you build from there.
Interesting. Yeah, we've outside of the marketing world, we've kind of been tackling that, even with Demandbase, of kind of saying, like, what are these big transformational, cross-functional, integrated projects that need to get, like, they need dedicated focus. They're different than like, hey, the whole company needs to do X. It's like, okay, who's the core team? What are we trying to drive? What does success look like? How are we going to look different when this is done? And I think you're right. All of those are sort of a microcosm of what hopefully the whole company does over time. If you do that and sort of practice it and scale it. We even talked this week, we had an offsite and we were talking about high performing teams and high performing culture. And we're like, okay, well, let's start with us, like as the exec team. Like, what do we need to do to be a high-performing culture? Like, what are all the things? What does that look like? How do you define it? All those things. And then how do we, let's do that first. Let's nail that. And then how do we cascade that to our teams so that our leadership teams are operating like that? And then eventually you sort of get down into the whole company being like that. So I love that idea of sort of biting off chunks. I often have that with my team, not quite on this exact thing, but I had a leader who I noticed had all the potential, but he had like all of his projects, and each week would try to like move all of them forward 2 inches. And I'd be like, how about you pick 2? Just get them over the finish line. Then come back and get 2 more and get them over the finish line. Because then you'll actually see some success. You'll see some quick wins. You'll learn a lot along the way that you can then apply to the next one instead of trying to get all of them like slowly moving forward. And I think that's a similar approach, which is like bite off something you can chew, work it out there, take your learnings, spread it to the next one, and continue. So I really like that idea of that integration, alignment, like orchestrating but contained, approach to transformation.
Yeah, we do this with, we bring this mindset to every engagement, but one in particular that comes to mind is a mid-market, quickly becoming enterprise technology company client of ours, and we started with a very humble, I think the target account list was like 110 accounts. And I think like 90 of them were in the United States and 20 of them were in the UK. And we did an ABX pilot and set realistic goals. We did all the stuff and together with our client. And then realistically over about a 2.5 year period, that ABX pilot went from a pilot to an equally important and go-to-market motion in tandem with the company's North American one-to-many demand gen motion. Kind of like in the third phase, the ABX approach, they said, you know what, we for our strategy, and this isn't right for every single company, but for this company, they said, you know what, in North America, we're going to put most of our focus in the ABX strategy. So the demand gen go-to-market motion started to fall off, and it was dominant ABX. And then in the fourth phase, we took it global.
Interesting.
And like what I love about that story is that it was wildly successful. Yay for everybody involved, but it's also wildly pragmatic.
Yeah, not overwhelming. Like step approach to it, one step at a time, very methodical in how, and you could course correct as you went. You could see where the learnings were, scale, course correct, scale.
Yeah, and it's not. We do a lot of RevOps work we do a lot of creative and content and media, but we also do a lot of RevOps work. And when you talk to people who are earlier in their RevOps journey, they always think that the big challenge is, can you get my tech stack to do a thing? The answer is always pretty much yes, unless you're completely delusional. The answer is yes, we can. The bigger thing is, are you doing the right thing with your tech stack and data and reporting and analytics? Or like, why are you doing it and to what end?
Yeah.
And that points you back to strategy. And it also points you back to process, like revenue process. And again, revenue process sounds like corporate consulting jargon. What we really mean, as I would say this to everybody on the podcast who listens, when you hear process or revenue process, what I'm really saying is human beings in marketing, SDR, sales, CFO. That's really what I mean, being like, am I going to follow this or not, man? Yeah. Like, do I really, that's what that really is. Yeah. And if you can't get your strategy, your processes, your revenue and go-to-market roles sort of defined, which is another way of saying human and system behavior change, then you're going to be like, yeah, the technology didn't work. And you're like, it was not the technology, y'all. With love.
Yeah. I see that even like when I meet with a lot of our CMOs, our customers. Some will say, man, we love everything about Demandbase. We're running our whole demand gen engine on it. We're running it globally. We've got 20 different predictive models set up. It's killing it. We've seen this much lift in all of our, whatever conversion rates, like whatever, all the things. And then there's others, which is a lot of them that will say, we think we love Demandbase. And the parts we're using are great, but we feel like there's a lot of it that we just haven't figured out how to integrate into our processes, right? We just don't it's got all this power and we just haven't, we're only utilizing 20% of its value. And so it's always like, it's not the tool, it's us. We need to do some change to maximize our effectiveness to really, really get the value here. And I think that's where it is. It's not usually the tech's problem. It's the integration of the tech into our processes and change management, like you said. So I love that. I hear that validated every single day.
I bet from your seat.
Yeah. Well, cool. I know we're going long here. So we'll do a little bit of a hop round here at the end.
Okay.
And you may have kind of talked about this with sort of the new playbook, but for young marketers who only know this sort of recent marketing playbook, whether it's jargon or real life, whether they've experienced it or not, what's one piece of advice you might give to a young marketer who's wanting to either drive a new playbook, be relevant, not be replaced by AI, or whatever that advice could be? What would you?
That's a good question. If I was a young marketer earlier in my career, I think what I would recommend is first and foremost to make a permanent career-long mind shift. You're in marketing second. You are in business growth first. Mm-hmm. If you do that, it will help you naturally in small, medium, and large ways, naturally make better decisions as a marketer. And it will help you avoid really the number one way that marketers, at a minimum, their career stalls out, but sometimes they can get fired, they can get laid off.
Yeah.
And it's when marketers talk marketing shit to people who don't care. I'm sorry not to cuss, but I see it a lot. It's like my advice to that younger marketer would be whether you're seeing it in your company yet or not, be the person in the meeting, in the room, in the project, in the campaign, in the play that asks some fundamental questions that might seem like it's outside of your role, but it's not. I'm here to tell you it's not. Things like, what is the measurable, clear growth priority, growth goal, and KPI for the doing of this thing? Can anybody tell me that? Be the one to ask that. That's not a marketing question. That's a business question.
Yeah.
Be the one to say, who is the target audience? And if you say something like TAM, wrong answer.
Yeah.
Be the person to say, okay, what are we why would that target audience give a shit about our product? What is the value prop, the positioning, and the messaging? And then someone, dear young marketer, might go, I told you to go make a newsletter. Why are you asking these stupid questions? I'm telling you, they're not stupid questions. Whether you're doing a newsletter send or a whole full-blown acquisition campaign. And it all comes down, I think, you get me all passionate about this, Kelly. It all comes down to having a growth business growth mindset. Don't think like a marketer.
I love that. Yeah, I always use the phrase with my team when they ask for advice or thoughts. I always say, be a business athlete. Like, be like as an athlete, my boys are athletes. They don't care if they're playing football, basketball, track, they're going to show up. They're going to exude athleticism regardless. I'm like, so whether you're playing marketing or you're playing sales or you're playing product or whatever, like, be a business athlete. Like, look at a P&L. Understand. I used to always tell teams if they were struggling, I'd say, if you don't know like where to focus, look at a P&L, listen to an investor call, figure out where the puck is going and skate to that. Like, figure out how, if you know that business unit is where we're investing all of our dollars, then figure out how you can help scale that business. If you know that we are struggling with retention, then figure out how do we get our customers to love us? Like, figure out what the business problems are, and then back end solutions instead of bottoms up. I got a newsletter to create. Like, because you're going to write that newsletter very differently if you know that you're trying to make them love this company and giving them really valuable content versus formatting a newsletter.
That's right.
It's a very different. So I love that advice. I think that's fantastic. I know that I stole all your fun facts at the beginning, but I have a feeling that you have more. So I'm going to ask you. Last question is, what's one fun fact about you that maybe people don't know?
Oh, okay, this is true. I think before I tell the story, I got to make sure I'm going through my mind. Am I going to regret saying the story? I don't think so.
Who would be listening to this podcast that might get mad at me?
You might be surprised. So, all right. So you mentioned earlier, my whole life, I've been a singer and a songwriter and a guitar player, and I've recorded albums and I've toured, and I was never anything close to famous. I was a regionally trying to get out of regionally quasi known at best. Okay. So that, I have no delusions of grandeur, but my, for like 30 plus years, I was a working musician. And to this day, like my wife, that's how I met my wife. She's a singer, and in about a month, we're going to be going on a radio show. So I still do it.
Okay. Love it. I love you have
but that's not the fun fact. The fun fact is I founded Intelligent Demand literally in the backseat of a tour van while on tour 15 years ago. And I had to have an AT&T mobile phone and a Verizon mobile phone, because depending on where in the country we were, I had to have internet.
One covered people, one covered land. You had to choose whichever.
Exactly. Yeah. And I had to sit there in the way back of the van with my band in front of me. They were thankfully someone was driving, and I would about to get on a client call. I had trained my band I would say, shut up. And then everybody get quiet. And I'd get on a call with like some healthcare enterprise company and say, okay, let's talk about change management and your growth strategy. And I was literally on tour. So anyway.
I love it. I think that's great. I mean, I think that's, you were remote and mobile before the world was remote and mobile.
That's a nice way to say that, Kelly. Thank you.
How did you, was there something that inspired you in the back of your van that was like, I'm done with this like corporate thing, I want to start my own thing, or I'm seeing that the world is evolving and I want to be a part of that change? Like, did you recognize that like intersection of like, I need to be on the other side of this?
Yeah. ID came from me I was ID's client. I was the head of marketing and or sales and or business development and technology and services companies for the first decade of my career. And toward the end of that time, I looked around and honestly, that's where I developed my relatively low opinion of agencies, to be totally frank, which is funny how karma works. Yeah. But because I would get pitched by these agencies that would walk in and they would dress up their tactic du jour as a strategy, or maybe they knew their tactic, their one little thing, but they didn't seem to care or connect to my existentially important thing, which is I had to drive growth.
Yeah.
And it was from there that I was like, well, what if there was a different kind of partner that literally defined its success as the same success as the CMO and CRO? And that's where ID came from.
Gotcha. I love it. I love it. Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. If listeners want to learn more about you or follow you, where should they go? What's your major platform?
Oh, thanks for asking. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. And if just search me and just say hello, I love engaging with folks. And you might see me connected to Intelligent Demand, or you might see me connected to a podcast called Growth Driver. I'm involved in both of those.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, John Common, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. And folks our listeners, thank y'all for listening. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'm sure you did. And then we'll see you on the next episode of the Next Gen CMO podcast.